Alright guys, what's up? This is actually my wife's idea, so if it doesn't go well, we won't do it again. But if it's great, maybe we'll throw some recipes out there because we're all under Corona-mageddon, stuck home with our children. As you can see, I'm joined here with my oldest son, Dino Blaze. Say hi, Dino Blaze. Okay. And today we're going to do breakfast for dinner because we love breakfast and we love dinner. But we really love biscuits, and they're super versatile. They can be made way ahead of time. It can be one of those things that's super adaptable. So if you don't love the recipe I have today, we can talk about ways to change it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of fly through the recipe, get them in the oven, then we're going to talk about ways that you can turn it into something of your own. Okay? So, from the top, biscuits utilize what is called the biscuit method. I know it's mind-blowing. And in the biscuit method, what we do is we cut the fat into our flour and or dry ingredients, and then we hydrate it, and then we use it. It's one of the three main mixing methods, the other two being the creaming method, and then the muffin method, neither of which we're going to do today. So, here we have our flour. You should be able to see the recipe here. It is in grams because everything we do in the professional kitchen, we like it to be as consistent as possible. So volume is usually not the best way to go. There's a lot of variables when it comes to volume. So, you understand that, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we have 250 grams of flour. It's all purpose. I'll talk a little bit about that later. You can adjust your flours as needed, but today we have all purpose flour, and that's about 2 cups. And then we're gonna cut in 72 grams of butter, cold, straight from the fridge. I'm lazy, so I use a microplane. You can cut it in by hand. If you have one of those old-fashioned pastry cutters, you can totally do that. You can use your stand mixer with the paddle and cut it in as much as possible. But for now, we're just gonna do this, and then I'm gonna hand it over to Dino Blaze. Why don't you roll up your sleeves, buddy?
You mean my claws?
Yeah, roll up your claws. All right. Yeah. So we've cut our fat. You know, you read a lot of things that'll say pea-sized, blackberry-sized, whatever size. The size of the fat will kind of indicate your finished product. The larger the fat, the more flaky and crumbly it will be. The smaller the fat, the more even the crumb structure will be, something like a scone, okay? So here is our flour, our butter. I'm gonna add the baking powder, salt, and black pepper. This is freshly, you can totally use the stuff that comes in the little canister from the store. It's just not gonna be as rich as freshly cracked black pepper. This is also a considerable amount of black pepper. If for some reason you're not feeling it, totally fine, and we'll talk about the substitutions later. But Dino Blaze, can you kind of gently toss all that together? We wanna keep it all in the bowl, so just gently toss it.
Okay.
Okay. Really get the fat, yeah? Mix it in there. So what Dino Blaze is doing for us is he's incorporating the butter into the dry ingredients that are sort of mixed. Through his agitation, he'll break down the fats a little bit more, but at no time should we start melting the fats out. Obviously in summertime, that's something we have to worry about in Texas. Currently it's not too bad, but we don't want to overhandle the fat at this point because we want to make sure it stays in our product. So I'm going to jump in. Excellent job, Dino Blaze. Quick wipe, pat dry. We've made sure that we've washed and sanitized and done everything, but we also have a pretty extensive cootie killing process with the oven, so I'm feeling pretty safe about these in general. Now, here's our dry ingredients. If you could see it more closely, we still have big old chunks of butter in there. We also have some smaller chunks of butter in there, so we'll get a good kind of melange of shapes. Next, we add buttermilk. The buttermilk is nice because it'll add a lot of hearty richness. It'll give us a nice little tang, and it'll help bring everything together. I'm going to use my bowl scraper here. It's a tool that all pastry chefs have and use. We love it. If you don't have one, get one. They're cheap. So we're just going to bring this together until it is kind of a shaggy mass. We don't want to over mix it, but this is something obviously that can be fun to do. We could do this by hand, but until the flour really incorporates, there's a good chance you're going to overwork it. I'm sure, hopefully, everybody knows overworking a biscuit dough makes it very tough. So we try to kind of gently just put it together. Now, the biscuit I'm making today is a very particular type of biscuit. There are obviously all kinds of biscuits. This one is going to be a little softer, a little taller. It will have some flakes, but it's not going to be like the flakiest biscuit. It's also not going to be super crumbly. I don't know what it is about restaurants a lot of times, especially fast food restaurants. When they make a biscuit, it falls apart with whatever is on it, and that drives me crazy. Because if you're going to use it as a vessel, it should have some structure to it, right? So now I'm getting a mass that's holding together. I'll switch to my hand and just gently press it, flip it over. I'm a firm believer that biscuits will kind of take as much flour as they want. So once you start mixing it, if there's still some dregs in the bowl of flour, let it go. Just let it go. If we work too hard to get it in there, again, there's a good chance we're going to overwork our dough, and that seems unnecessary. So next comes rolling, patting, marking it with a B, right? And then putting it in the oven. So to do that, instead of covering my entire surface with flour, which is super annoying in a home kitchen, especially on Corona-mageddon, I like to use plastic wrap. It keeps everything nice and clean for me. It makes transferring my dough between places super, super easy. And you're gonna see it's the only way to go. Turn my bowl over, everything dumps out. Right, this extra flour will incorporate on its own here. Because we've just mixed it. Flour is a very complex starch, and it has a pretty decent amount of protein in it. So it's gonna take a little bit to hydrate. So part of that comes through resting the dough. I told you we're kind of under the gun here. We gotta get some time. You see I folded my plastic wrap over, creating a nice little envelope so it can't go anywhere. I flip it over, and I'm just gonna pat it to help it get some dimension. I'm not worried about a particular thickness at this point. Plus, you know, it's the South. They say the higher the biscuit, the closer to God, right, buddy? Yeah, okay. So we're gonna pat it. We're gonna let it do its thing. You see I'm not using a rolling pin at all. It's one of the other benefits of plastic wrap. Rolling pins are great unless you don't have one. I've been in countries around the world where they don't really use rolling pins, so we just kind of did everything by hand. And you know, it's kind of a way to feel your dough, see what's going on. Now, this biscuit dough is ready to cook right now. We can cut it and use it. Obviously, if you want 100% use out of it, 100% yield, cut it into squares, throw it on a tray, bake it. What I want to do is I want to get a couple of flaky layers in there. Not a ton, but a couple. So what we're going to do is what's called lamination. Can you say lamination?
Lamination.
Lamination, right? So what we do there is we pat it a little thinner. And again, this is one of the beauties of plastic wrap. We will fold it on itself, pat it, peel the plastic wrap back straight like a Band-Aid, fold the other one up and over. And you see we just put in 2 little layers. We should get 3 delicious layers out of the entire thing. We'll pat that. Right now, I would say it's a little thick for my taste. If it's too tall with layers in there, it can topple over. So I'm gonna pat it down to about anywhere between 2/3 and 1/2 inch, right? So I'm just gonna pat it, again, keeping it real simple. What do you think, Blaze? That look good?
Pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much good. All right, so next, just a little bit of flour, because I didn't want to add a ton of flour to the recipe, so I'm not going to continue doing this. I'm going to flip it over, peel it back. You see how easy that was with the plastic wrap. I have a container of flour here. I take my cutter, it's whatever size you like, straight in, and then we cut straight down and straight up. You don't twist it. If you twist it, you're going to seal these beautiful little layers together, and then they won't be able to get the most rise. So one more time. A little bit of flour, straight down, straight up, right? Our biscuit should come right off of there. That's what that little layer of flour did on our plastic wrap. And then I'm gonna let Dino Blaze cut a couple for us as well. So here we go, buddy. Use your cutter into the flour, straight down into the dough. You got it. Wow, cut right in the middle, okay. And then straight up. So Dino Blaze here cut right in the middle of our dough, which is not unexpected. But that means it's going to change our yield, which of course is what it means to work with dinos. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut the other full ones that we can, which is only 1, when we could have probably gotten 6. And that's part of the reason, you know, we thought this series might be good. So what we do with this is we have our trim, right? What's left over. We can gently pat that back together We don't want to agitate it too far because we're going to activate all that, nasty gluten that everybody worries about. But in a biscuit, if we get too much gluten, it'll be very, very tough, right? So I'd say that you can kind of rework a biscuit once, maybe twice, if you're really lucky, but I don't push it any further than that. Now, if it's Dino Blaze and my youngest son is almost 2, he's not going to know the difference between a great biscuit and a, substandard biscuit. It's probably fine. But we're going to cut, remember, straight down, straight up, straight down, straight up. And then a lot of times what I do, especially in the professional kitchen, is I will bake off just the scrap, the trim as it is, without any real shape. That'll be kind of my little snack. Or of course, I have a square here. It's hard to see from where you are, but I have a little square here. I can tuck the corners of my square, and I can just kind of gently form what will mostly be a circle. And see, what I'll have is an uneven biscuit, but that'll give me those like nooks and crannies and crevices that honestly no one seems to mind. So it's really totally fine. We'll do the same over here. We'll gently pat it together. And of course, we can throw this in there as kind of a little Frankenform biscuit, but we have the abilities to make it nice, so we will. And then all of these little dregs on the side here, we'll just do like a pseudo drop style, pressing them together just so they hold together, not really trying to create anything new, and we'll have like a little drop biscuit all on its own, right? So out of this recipe, and about a 3-inch ring, might be 2 3/4, we have 8 and 1 drop biscuit, right? Do they need to rest? It's good if they rest. It is not necessary for them to rest. The resting process will help the gluten relax. It will help the fat solidify. Because when it goes in the oven, if it is cold fat, like if it were chilled, it will steam, giving us a lot more rise. But if you were smart like we were, and we worked really fast with really cold butter and we didn't touch it too much, it should still be fairly cold. Right? So I'm going to get these in the oven, 425 degrees minimum Fahrenheit, because we want a lot of heat to create a lot of rise. Because again, we need all that steam, and there's not a lot of liquid in here, so we need it to puff up real fast. So in the oven, and now we wait. How long does it take to bake? It's different for each size. If you're baking for more than 15 minutes, there's probably something wrong. Now, they don't have to go straight into the oven. They could easily just sit in your fridge, cut. They could sit in your freezer, cut. They can sit in your fridge whole. If you were super, super cool, you can make little tubes like the Pillsbury ones that we buy and cut them. But usually we make them to be baked immediately or the next day. Because what will happen is over time it'll start to oxidize. Nobody wants to eat kind of a weird gray-brown biscuit. But if you froze them and baked them from frozen, again, high heat, 425 or higher, until they are done. How do we know they're done? We don't want to poke them with a thermometer, even though that is an option. The best indicator is the top, and the bottom should be the same color, right? Now I put my biscuits directly onto a dark baking tray. I did not use parchment or tin foil, even though both of those are perfectly fine. You can use a cast iron skillet. You can put them in something that's covered in a layer of fat. It'll change the way it cooks, but it should still hold true that the top and the bottom are more or less the same color, right? Good job. Dino Blaze, give me the elbow. Boom. All right. Now, those are in the oven. They're baking. While they're baking, let's talk about how we can make this our own. What if you have self-rising flour? Totally fine. Omit the baking powder from this recipe and just use the total weight together. So around 265 grams or 2 heaping cups of self-rising flour. Totally fine. What if you want an extra crispy biscuit for some reason? Move from AP flour up to bread flour and change nothing else. The higher protein content will absorb that moisture even faster. You will get a drier, crispier biscuit. Joe, what if I want more layers? Laminate more times. You can overdo it and create something that looks a little bit like puff pastry. It's not the worst thing in the world. But if you overhandle it and you make it too thin, you will have essentially made a cracker. Again, not terrible, but if you're looking for biscuits, not the way to go. Joe, I don't really like buttermilk. I don't want to use, cow's milk for any of this. You can use any liquid at all. The buttermilk does a couple things for us because the acid denatures the protein. So if you want to make sure it's a really tender biscuit, use a liquid that has acid in it, something like orange juice or water and a touch of vinegar. Or if you're crazy, you can use vodka. It'll work just fine. If you want super, super flaky, crispy biscuits, you would use bread flour and water, and everything else will be mostly the same. If you want to change out your fats, you definitely can. Butter is kind of the staple in most places. In my opinion, shortening makes a taller, softer biscuit. Lard is super delicious. We just don't use a lot in our house. My wife is vegetarian. Lard is kind of the purest form of biscuits. It'll make them extra crispy, extra flaky. You can use oil. You can use bacon fat. You can use schmaltz. You can use any other fat and just sub it in there. If you have a coconut shortening or a vegan substitute, totally fine. What we're looking for is when that fat melts, it will create steam. So as long as it does that, we're fine. If we're worried about gluten, you can make gluten-free biscuits. It's not going to be the best. The gluten structure is what traps all that gas. So it's really nice to have the gluten structure, traps the gas, it rises up in the oven. Otherwise, you'll still have a biscuit, it'll just be a little flatter. Gluten-free alternatives have come a long way. Goodness knows I use a lot of them. But when it comes to something as like nostalgic as a biscuit, we try to keep the gluten in there. It's the same reason when people ask me to make gluten-free bagels, I just immediately say, no, it's just not gonna happen. Like, I can't make them very well, so I'm not gonna do it. Looking at the ingredients, salt, it's pretty important. You can increase the salt, you can decrease the salt. It also changes according to the fat you use. If you use a lot of bacon fat, you'll probably want to pull the salt out of it. If you use a lot of shortening, you might want to bump the salt up because there's not going to be a lot of flavor there. Black pepper, that's my personal favorite. It can be any other thing that you want to add to it, or no seasoning at all. If you want to take this in a different direction and use it as kind of a neutral base for breakfast and or strawberry shortcake, you can take all the black pepper out, even though I think black pepper is great with strawberries. And we can add an equal amount of sugar in there. Not a ton of sugar, but enough to kind of set off a sweet tone. If you want to add garlic powder, cayenne, whatever powdered seasoning you want, it'll absorb it just fine. Once we start, going above kind of 15 total grams here, or like a whole tablespoon or a tablespoon and a half of powdered additions, it will start to change the recipe and it'll dry it out. It's not going to be the worst thing, but don't be surprised if you add a ton of cinnamon for some reason. It's going to change the recipe because it absorbs all that water from the liquid product, right? So what do we think, Dino Blaze? Did we cover it? Do you have any questions? Do we have any questions from out there?
What if you don't have buttermilk? How do you make your own?
So what if we don't have buttermilk? Because we are in Corona-mageddon. Buttermilk is not important. I told you can use other liquids, but if you're like me and you're like, no, I really want that buttermilk. The traditional measurement to make your own buttermilk is you take 15 tablespoons of milk and you add 1 tablespoon of acid to it. Typically it's vinegar, right? You can bump that up to 2 tablespoons of vinegar and 14 tablespoons of milk. That might be super annoying. You might not want to weigh that out. If you're using a scale, each tablespoon is roughly a ½ ounce. So what we do is you get close to a cup and then you add vinegar to it to make it a cup. If you add too much vinegar or other acid to it, it will obviously curdle and that won't help us at all. But we can make our own. I did for this demo in particular. You can stir it together, let it sit on the counter for 20 minutes or so. That way it fully activates. It does not have to be vinegar. I said acid, so another popular one is lemon juice. You can add lemon juice in there, which of course opens the entire plethora of citrus juices. That'll help us slightly flavor something. So again, if I was going to try and go with more of a shortcake direction with this, I might use a Meyer lemon juice, or I might get like a grapefruit juice, or for me, clementines are king of citrus, so I would use some clementine juice. They're not all equally acidic, so it may take longer for it to activate. Regardless, we just need liquid with some kind of sour notes, just mostly for flavor and a little bit of bulking in the product. Other acids that we can use, cream of tartar is just the powdered form of tartaric acid. We can add around that, and as it liquefies, it will become acid again. Or of course, if we have all the time in the world, we can add sour cream or yogurt to our milk, and it will start to denature the milk into something closer to buttermilk. It will take longer than 20 minutes, but it will give you a buttermilk substitute for sure. Use equal ratios from what I described, either 14 and 2 or 15 and 1. What it is a cup is by and large 16 tablespoons, so you will end up making a cup of buttermilk substitute. Let's check on our biscuits, Lionel Blaze.
Sure.
Oh my goodness, they are gigantic. They look awesome. I can already tell by looking at them we have about 3 minutes. How do I know? It's because I'm Joe the Baker. It's really, really easy.
Do you use salted or unsalted butter?
Do I use salted or unsalted butter? It depends on the day, to be honest with you. When I was in culinary school, and for a very, very long time, we were all kind of trained and beaten to not use salted butter because salted butter is made that way essentially as a preservative. I think that progressively the American palate has grown to want more salt. So sometimes I will use salted butter and still add salt to the recipe. And I think anybody who's had my food, probably the thing I hear the most that they enjoy is my salt balance. So it really just comes down to what I'm feeling that day. And I'm not gonna lie to you, it's what's on sale. Like if unsalted butter costs less, I will get that. It is less preservative filled, so I have to use it faster and just kind of fix it on the other end. That's why in all good recipes, or really any recipe, it should be kind of considered to taste. Salt to taste and vanilla extract is always to taste in my book.
Miss Lindy says hi, Blaze.
Oh, Miss Lindy says hi, Blaze. Hi, okay. Any other questions before we pull these biscuits? Nothing. Okay, so we're gonna pull these biscuits. We need something to put them on to be safe. So we will throw this on the counter. Dino Blaze, this is gonna be hot. Right, here's our biscuits, tall and beautiful. You can see, hopefully, that we have some definition here. The tops are a golden brown delicious color. The bottoms are also a golden brown delicious color. You see I can pick them right up. It is hot, but it shouldn't be so hot because the steam should be going straight up. Now something that you should notice, maybe from there, is that our biscuits didn't spread. A properly made biscuit should only rise straight up. So if you have a ton of kids or a ton of family, or you like a lot of biscuits, you can put them real close together. They shouldn't run into each other. But pull apart biscuits are also totally fine. Totally, totally fine. I know people who love them in cast iron skillets and they just cram them in there and they pull them apart and they love it. You do you. Here is our second roll, right? So we can see our first go, nice, tall, craggly, smells amazing. I can't wait. Here is, you can totally smell it. Be careful.
Oh yeah, that actually smells good.
Well, thank you. I'm glad it actually smells good. Right, so then we have our Frankenform, right? This is the one I just kind of twisted together. You see, you know, bless its heart, it'll work. It'll still hold butter and jelly just fine. This is the other Frankenform. We're getting a little farther and farther from the circle. And then this is, of course, is my drop biscuit. This is the one we sample to make sure it's okay before we tell everybody, yeah, dinner's canceled. So what do we think?
Yay.
No, taste it. Crispy, super crispy on the outside, really soft on the inside. It's got a little flakiness, not a ton. I could have laminated it more. I could have added lard. It would be awesome. The black pepper, again, it seems like a lot. It's really, really nice. Now, something I didn't say, for a while there, I was providing these to a restaurant downtown that has since closed. And for those biscuits, they wanted them full of cheddar. How much cheddar do we put in? As much as you want. The cheddar or any other cheese, as long as it's not like goat's cheese or cream cheese, like if it's more of a solid, harder cheese, you can add almost as much as you want and it won't really change the recipe, but a good cheddar biscuit with this much black pepper, amazing. If you want to try and replicate some Red Lobster Cheddar Bay biscuits, you would do that, and then while they're still hot, you just hit them with a little bit of, you can use beurre blanc or you can just use melted butter with some chives. It'll taste awesome. If you wanted to add chives or slivered onions or slivered shallots or anything like that, it's super versatile. You can put it in there. We're not worried about exact shaping on biscuits, so as long as it doesn't start to absorb all the moisture, you're totally fine. Equally, as long as it doesn't create a lot of moisture, like you can't just add sugar or honey randomly to the recipe because those are liquid once they melt, you're fine. So again, as long as we don't exceed 15 to 20 grams, essentially a tablespoon to a tablespoon and a half of dried ingredients, and we don't add so much cheese that it just bakes into a cheese block, even though that's probably going to be delicious, then you are good to go. What else can we do with these biscuits, Dino Blaze?
I have no idea.
You have no idea? If I put these in just less than boiling water, like before I bake them, if I drop them into almost boiling water, that is dumplings. And it is super delicious. And if I were gonna make dumplings out of this dough, I would definitely sub out the butter for my own taste. I would definitely put chicken fat in there, some schmaltz, and then make chicken and dumplings, and it is crazy good. Super, 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 super good. So, any other questions out there? I'm super good, I know. Nothing. All right, guys. Thank you for entertaining us. We'll talk about this. Maybe I'll do a couple more. I don't know. And hopefully you make some biscuits. If you do, please shoot me some photos. You can reach out to me through all of the social if you run into any issues. Otherwise, do you think you could make these on your own?
Pretty much.
Pretty much. Dino Blaze can do it. You can do it. Thanks, everybody.